Behold, Gerald, I am the only one on the entire planet of Arrakis that has brought the mysterious sunshades.
What was that? I have sand in my ears. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Two Peas on a Sandworm. Gerald here with you, and over on the other side is the chosen one, Nicholas. How are you, buddy?
That's sunglasses guy to you again. I'm the only one smart enough on the entire planet of Arrakis to have rocked a pair of shades because they all look like they're blind in the movie, and I'm gonna leave the obvious joke about the sandworm between the legs. I'm just gonna leave it out there because it's not applicable to me. So I just wanted to man, the energy on this one's weird already, man.
It's tough, man. Well, man, I tell you, worms and everything is crazy. Well, we're talking, in case you haven't noticed, we're talking about Dune Part 2 on this week's episode. And I forgot to do the goddamn tagline, Nick, but sometimes we review the latest and sometimes greatest movies every week here on the Peas.
No, glasses are off now. Now, see, this is what you've done.
No, whoa.
You forget the tagline, the glasses come off.
Whoa.
How dare you? Now I'm putting on my regular glasses. I'm going to be blind. Like, I'm going to be like everybody in Dune 2, like squinting, like.
You gotta wear the sand goggles or whatever. You should do
Except for the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens were smart because they had like welding goggles and stuff on.
Yeah, the Harkonnens. We'll get into that. We'll talk about the Harkonnens.
We'll get into all of it, baby. We'll get into all of it.
Now, our buddy Caleb joined us right before this recording over on Patreon. You can check that out. We did a breakdown of Dune Part 1, I guess is what we're going to call it, from 2021. So we did that little mini review over on Patreon, and then we're segueing right over to our Dune Part 2 discussion, but Caleb had not seen that yet, so he's not joining us for this particular episode, but it was a lot of fun to talk to him about the original film, and if you head over to Patreon, you can see what Nick gave that film, which, I don't know, you might want to be prepared. All right, well, before we talk about Dune Part 2, Nick, we start out every episode. We head over to see what the fans had to ask us this week in one big question.
You gotta ask yourself a question.
I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?
All right, Nick, let me tell everyone. So we had a new segment that we introduced week before last, because we took last week off. But It's called Spill the Peas, where we kind of dive into the world of entertainment news, a.k.a. shit that Nick could care less about.
It's true.
And we talk about that, but I didn't have a chance to peruse a lot of news stories this week with my work schedule and everything, so we just didn't have a lot of content to provide for that segment, so we'll pick that back up. If you guys like Spill the Peas, it'll be kind of whenever we have stuff that we want to talk about.
So to Spill the Peas, about the Spill the Peas segment, Gerald did not cull enough news for Spill the Peas. Except for, what was the only thing you were going to bring up? Like the Nicole Kidman AMC ads, which I don't even know what you're talking about. I have no idea what that even is.
Well, it's a pop culture thing too, but the AMC has a partnership with Nicole Kidman, and she did this thing where like their whole tagline is "We make movies better." So she has this like 60-minute thing walking into an AMC talking about the power of movies and cinema, and it's her watching a movie in an AMC. And anyway, it was a really cool ad, but they ran it before every movie at every AMC for the last like 3 years, and it was the exact same promo. And they killed that, and she filmed 3 new ones that are going to sporadically kind of play randomly. So I don't know, if you go to AMC, it was kind of a big deal because does Regal do that where you have to watch the same promo before every single movie, or no?
Oh, good for you.
I don't know.
Luckily for you, we're not doing the Spill This Piece segment. So
yeah, lucky for me.
All right, did you have a question over there?
So our good friend. So I got a couple for you here, G. One of them I'm going to wait.
I had one for you too.
One of them I'm going to wait until we get a little bit further in. But let me ask you mine. And it's kind of a fun one. It's from our good buddy David Powell over on We Watched the Thing. He said, if Gerald was the Kwisatz Haderach, I don't know what that is. It's a Dune thing. If Gerald was a Dune thing, I guess if you were the Timothy Chalamet character, if you were Space Jesus, Gerald, if you were Space Jesus, would you really pick Zendaya over Florence Pugh?
Oh, no. I'm never picking over Florence Pugh. I think he knows that, though. David knows that.
I mean, Pugh's the Empress, too. Like, she's like the princess of the whole Imperium. So, I mean,
I'll say.
You get that?
Yeah.
Jeez, God.
And although, hey, Zendaya's got it going on too, and she did really good in both of these films. I thought she had a really good performance.
She's in the first movie for about 4 seconds.
Yeah, but she's good. She's good. No, she's good. I think
she's not in the movie enough to measure the value of the performance.
All right, well, we're talking about Dune Part 2, and she was really good in that. Chani, I think, right? Chani. All right, well, so you said you're going to hold the other one, but I think David knew that was a rhetorical question for me because Florence Pugh is like...
I just wanted to hear it. Because I'm
come on, dude.
I mean, I love Zendaya too, but I mean, it's Florence Pugh, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to, yeah. So over in the Facebook fan page, I thought it would be fun to throw this one at you because I know you haven't seen these questions yet. But our buddy Jared Taylor, patron and friend of the show, Destruction in Human Form himself, he says, "What role in Dune would be perfect for Tommy Wiseau?" Nick. What do you got, buddy? Could you imagine Tommy Wiseau in the world of Dune in these movies? He would actually fit into the David Lynch film, right? 84 pretty easily.
Put him in the role. Put him in Javier Bardem's role, like
Stilgar.
Yeah, give him Stilgar because I mean, basically Stilgar is just like a really devout like Chalamet worshiper, I guess, for most of this movie, and like he's just like quirky and eccentric, and he gets a couple of the more comedic beats and different things like that. Yeah, Stilgar. Give me Stilgar. If it was in part 1, make him Duncan, Idaho.
Duncan, Idaho. Oh man, that's actually Stilgar is actually a pretty good answer. I wonder what I would I would probably I would say have it be one of the Harkonnens. Make him bald, you know? Could you imagine bald Tommy Wiseau as a villain? That'd be good. That's a good answer, though. Thank you guys for the submissions for one big question.
Make him Rebecca Ferguson's character. Make him the Reverend Mother.
No, I can't take Rebecca.
But they still call him Reverend Mother, even, you know. And he still has he has all the robes and he has all the like writing and stuff all over his face, but he still has the chain wallet too.
Got to get my score. I don't even know he still has the chain wallet. No sunglasses, but there's chain wallets.
That's right.
All right. Hold on.
I've got to venture out into the desert sands of Arrakis here. I gotta grab my sunglasses here.
Are we ready? So we are going to be discussing Dune Part 2 tonight from Denis Villeneuve. And starring Mr. Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler finally shows up here. And let's see what we got. We just had our discussion of Dune 1, and we will kind of tell people what you thought of that as we get into our discussion of Dune 2 here as well. Let's do the early score reveal, Nick. Roll the sound drop.
Damn it, this always happens. I think I'm going to score, and then I never score. It's not fair.
Did you fuck the popcorn bucket? That's what I need to know before you give me your score.
They had the bucket itself, but they didn't have the worm top head. They didn't have the worm head.
Yeah, it's not the same without the worm.
No, it's definitely not.
Trust me, I've been around.
It's hot dog down a hallway territory with the bucket. I mean, at least the worm helped. Like try to something. I don't even know.
Go both ways. All right. Count us in, man. Here we go. Our score out of 10. We have not discussed it with each other for Dune Part 2. Let's do it.
3, 2, 1. Another 5 from Nick. This is the same score I gave Part 1. Spoilers for the Patreon episode.
You are a blasphemous, soulless person.
Yep.
A 5?
Yep, a 5.
You see what I'm holding up there?
I see it. Double my 5. That's what he's got.
It's a 10. It is a 10 out of 10.
Ridiculous. I
me,
honest to God, I find this whole thing, people lauding this as some modern masterpiece. I legitimately do not understand what film you watch.
I'm on the train. Brother.
Do not get it.
Let's I don't know, man. It's tough, but let's do like a little spoiler-free section here because there's obviously so much like detail and stuff to talk about. But for the next 5 minutes or so, let's try to keep it spoiler-free, Nick. Okay, so we will let you guys know when we get into spoilers for Dune Part 2. And also, as we're having our discussion tonight, we will probably be talking about Dune Part 1 as well, as it kind of bleeds into this film. So if you've not seen Dune from 2021, And definitely, if you have not seen Dune Part 2, just be warned. But we'll let you know when we get into spoilers for this particular movie. So for me, Nick, and then I'll let you, I don't know, talk about sunglasses or whatever you want to say. But first of all, I mean, there's so many reasons why this score's perfect for me. And part of it actually does have to do with Part 1. I mean, we just had our discussion of that with Caleb, like I said. And I wasn't as high on that film, although I did really like it as a world building kind of movie. And now it's like the world was built for me. A lot of the characters were introduced. And then we get here to part 2, and it's like, here we go. You've got your setup. You know the premise. You know the lore. And bam, let's go. This movie, I hate long movies, as you know. This movie never dragged for me. I was never bored. The pacing, I thought, was flawless. The moments where it kind of came down from its heightened, action or whatever, was a lot of touching moments with Chalamet and Zendaya. And I know you had a problem with the character development in the first film. I'm not sure what you're going to say about the characters in this film, but one of the points that you made when we had our part 1 discussion was the kind of lack of the threat of the villain in the first movie. And I really love the kind of growth that we saw from the dark side, if you will, no pun intended, to Star Wars fans, with the Harkonnens and the introduction of Floyd Rotha, which is portrayed awesome by Austin Butler, I thought, in this movie. So I love this movie. Did everything for me that I kind of wished part 1 had done when I saw it back in 21. And also that first movie I saw on HBO Max, we were just talking about it. We were talking about Regal and AMC about the day and date. And that movie came out, during the whole pandemic thing. So they released it on Max. I think it did release in theaters, but it was like weird because people weren't going out and it was limited showtimes and whatever. And you had to, have 3 seats between you and the person next to you or whatever. I don't know, whatever it was back then.
Right.
So I saw it on TV at my house. And obviously this I saw on IMAX. So just the experience of it by default is going to be better for me than that first movie, because seeing this on the big screen and in IMAX specifically was just like, I mean, it was just awesome, man. It was very, very similar to the way I felt when I saw Oppenheimer in IMAX last year. Like, it was just a fantastical moment where you're looking at it and you're just thinking, this is cinema. Like, this is beautifully executed, shot. And as we get into the spoiler side, I'll talk about some other things that I really love with different characters and the villains and stuff like that. But overall, I just think that this is truly in the era of where we are now. When you look back and you think about sequels, specifically like The Two Towers, or I've heard people mention Star Wars and like The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh my God.
In the 80s. When you look at that kind of stuff, I feel like we're living through a phenomenon like that now with this science fiction world that's being built before our eyes. Mr. 5 out of 10. Spoiler-free thoughts. What do you
This
got?
doesn't even come close to touching The Lord of the Rings, first of all. Jackson's trilogy is immaculately better than this. Like, infinitely better than this. You know why? Because it focused on its characters, and it invested you in its characters before it sent them off on this mission, which is kind of the anti-Dune. Dune is full throttle ahead with this ridiculous plot and all these different things going on. Go listen to the Patreon breakdown that we did with Caleb. He did Herbert explain some Dune to us. He's a huge Dune fan. So it was nice to get a little bit more information about some of the backstory and different things like that, as far as different things Dune related are. But it's not going to surprise you to learn that a lot of my problems with this film are carryovers from my problems with the first film. I wasn't really all that invested in T.T. Chalamet's performance, and his performance is good. I don't fault his performance, but I was not really all that invested in Paul Atreides as a character. This ties into my other one big question I was going to ask Gerald, and that's from Julio of the Contrarians. And Julio said, is Paul Atreides a boring vanilla character by design, or have the people playing him simply failed to make him interesting? I don't know, because I've never seen any other iteration of Dune. I've never read Dune, but in these movies, Paul Atreides, to say nothing of Chalamet's performance, because I think his performance has a lot of power and a lot of gravitas to it, but I think the character is so so flat. And I'm not invested in or interested in Space Jesus' story whatsoever. I really, really don't like it. Like, we get more from the villains in this time. I will agree with you. We definitely get more from the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens feel like more of a threat thanks to Austin Butler's character. I really, really do agree. We meet some characters for the Imperium. We meet the Emperor Christopher Walken. We meet Florence Pugh's character as the princess, and all these kind of different aspects of the universe. Like, all these little pieces start to fall into place. But again, I was so not invested in these characters, and this film does nothing to really deepen that. Like, it does. Okay, so let me say this without spoiling anything. I think the first third of this movie, or maybe even the first half of this movie, like, it does spend some of those more quiet character moments, like especially between Paul and Zendaya's
Johnny.
character. I really, really think that those are some of the better moments of this film. Zendaya's the best performance in this film by a landslide, and I will fight anybody who disagrees with me. Zendaya, like, without even the dialogue, like, just the blistering looks that she gives to camera and to Paul in different times of this movie. Man, Zendaya's on another level in this movie. Like, it's unreal how good her performance is. But
Yeah, I think her and Rebecca Ferguson fall in that category. They're both just so good at what they're doing in this movie.
see, Rebecca Ferguson, we're gonna have to get into spoilers when we talk about it, but she was a highlight of the first movie for me. She completely was a train derailing off the tracks of this movie for me. I did not like her character at all. I thought it was a complete shift in her character from the first one. I know in the first film, spoilers for the first Dune, I guess, but I know that they had planted those seeds of the Bene Gesserit, or the space witches, whatever the heck they're supposed to be, like, are the ones that are like the real, string pullers in the background of everything, like trying to call these bloodlines and like sow the seeds of this, like, religious fanaticism on Arrakis and different things like that. But like, her character all of a sudden took like this super weird turn that I was not on board with in this movie, in terms of like, she became kind of a direct arm of that, and like, she was really much less invested in Paul, her son, than she was in Paul, Space Jesus. Like, I really think that was like the whole kind of difference there. I think we got to tear it down the spoiler wall to really get into a lot else. But overall, so again, I did give this the same score as part one. I do think this is a better film than part one, but I think it carries over all of the same problems that I had with part one. And that, like, once the Space Jesus stuff starts, and I'm sorry, I don't know what else to call him aside from, what is his name in the movie besides Paul Atreides, like all the different religious monikers and stuff like that they have for him. He has like a lot of different names that they refer to him as. But like, that half of the movie, like, once you shift into that half of the movie, like, I thought that turn was way too fast for that character. He really resisted wanting to make a certain choice in the movie. Like, he really resisted it for the first half of the movie, and we just got a lot of smaller, quieter character moments that were a lot better. And then all of a sudden it shifts full throttle into Space Jesus mode, and I was just like, wait, like, it was so abrupt for me. And the movie lost me from there. Like, the movie, and here's the thing, here's the thing. You mentioned the villains. You mentioned like the Harkonnens actually getting their due. They got no screen time in the first movie. They were not a threat at all. They did not feel like threatening at all, because you didn't know anything about him in the first movie whatsoever. You had like Dave Bautista, like being Dave Bautista, I guess. You had Stellan Skarsgård as a big giant floating dude, whatever was the deal with that or whatever. But then they bring in Austin Butler as this like super psycho badass type character, and like the scene like with him in the arena, like all that kind of different stuff shot in black and white on the Harkonnen homeworld, like all that stuff was like super cool. And I was like, oh man, we're gonna get like these badass sequences of the villain. They didn't do anything with him after that. Like, that's the thing for me. Like, everybody's going on and on about how great Austin Butler is in the film and how threatening and terrifying and everything he is. And I don't disagree in those scenes, but then the movie doesn't do anything with him after that. Once they leave the Harkonnen homeworld and he shows up on Arrakis, he's basically a non-issue. He does nothing.
Right. So we're into spoilers. Going forward, anything we mention about Dune Part 2 will be spoilery, so be warned.
It will be spicy, even.
And Nick will continue to be wrong, too, so this is your warning for that as well. Look, man, it's not even that I disagree with the points that you're making. I I hear you, okay, but for me, the connection was made, and I think that's the big disconnect between you and I's kind of reception of the film is that you just didn't have the connection to the characters, and particularly to Paul, because even with all these other really cool characters like Butler and like Zendaya, if you're not connected to Paul Atreides in the story, and really even going back to the first film, then it's just gonna be tough for you. I mean, it's like watching the Star Wars films and not caring about Luke Skywalker. I mean, it's a very similar mindset. If you don't care about the Skywalker journey, then you're not really gonna be able to follow Star Wars. You're not gonna be on board fully with the saga. So it's very similar in Dune, and I did connect. I am biased. I am a Timmy stan. I love him. I think he's one of the best actors working today. I just love everything he's in. I think everything he does is great. I don't think he's made a bad movie, which is crazy.
I mean, he gives a powerful performance in this film. Like,
Yeah,
make no mistake, it's
he's
going to
good.
sound the same. Like, I mean, I hate to go back to the thing that other people didn't listen to, and we want them to pay to listen to it because whatever, pay for Caleb because we had Caleb on that
Oh yeah,
episode, and I love
priceless.
Caleb. But it's just going to go back to the same things. Like, I think this is a beautifully shot film. I think it looks beautiful. I think, again, Zimmer's score is fantastic. I think it's really, really good. This is the kind of movie, like, I know it's a cliched thing to say, Gerald, but I know you would agree. This is the kind of movie that cinema was made for. Like, this is the kind of movie, in spite of Dan's meme about, like, I'm going to watch it on a phone to piss Denis Villeneuve off. Like, it is the kind of movie that needs to be seen in the biggest format possible. Like, it's beautiful. It's so beautifully shot. It's so well acted by everybody that's in it. Like I said, Zendaya acts, and this is. Let me really qualify this because I don't want people to get me wrong here, because all the rest of their performances in this film are really, really good to great. Zendaya acts circles around him still. That's how good Zendaya is in this movie. I really, really, really loved her performance, but I just was not connected to these characters. I was not on this journey with Paul. They did a lot of.
Yep.
Let me tell you, G. Like, even going into this, because I watched the first one twice, and going into this, I was like, man, I really hope this movie can do something to kind of improve my feelings overall on this franchise. First half of this movie, I was probably riding between a 7 and an 8. Like, I was on an upward trajectory. I was there. I was like, all right, this is doing it for me. Like, I'm really invested in this. Like, I'm really starting to care and all that stuff. And then it literally nosedived off a cliff for me. Once they go to the South, like, because he resists the whole time. He's like, I'm not going to the South because he's having these visions of this holy war that is going to be held in his name. And he doesn't want to go to the South. But, like, literally, he resists it for the first half of the movie, and then that turn of him going to the South and all of a sudden becoming this, like, messianic figure is instantaneous. It's so quick. It's way too fast for me.
Well, I'm sure Frank Herbert's novels are extremely in depth, and we talked about this when we did our Patreon with Caleb earlier, but I just don't see how Villeneuve was even able to turn this into a watchable film. I mean, or films. I really don't. Like, it's just such a intricate world that, I mean, even sitting here talking to you now, having just seen it, I'm still confused. Like, I don't know all the bloodlines and the lineage, and
I think especially with
more.
worlds like this, characters are the gateway to understanding and living through any world. Like, you don't need to know, unless you're a super fan like Caleb, like, you don't need to know, like, the lineage of all of the different leaders of House Atreides over, in the 8,000 years between the current day and, like, way in the far-flung future, and all the leaders of the Imperium, and, like, all the minutiae. Like, that's for super fans and stuff like that. But characters are the link into any kind of understanding, or to take this journey. You have to buy into the character to buy into the journey. If you're along with the character for the journey, along with the character to take the ride, then you're there, and I just wasn't.
But what I was going to say, though, to retort that, is that I feel like the way the movie played out, part 2 specifically, with Paul Atreides' character, who is obviously the central figure of these stories, I do think that in the runtime that that they had to work with, I did really believe kind of the arc of that character. And I'm saying that kind of in direct contention to what you were just saying, because I felt like they had a shortened amount of time to do it, right? Because kind of like what Caleb was saying before, you could make a 4-hour film. You could make a 4-hour movie and everything could play out and it explain everything to you, narration or whatever. But they don't do that. They kind of constrict it. And we get that battle within Paul that he's like between the North and the South. He's with the Furman, but he knows about this lineage. He knows his mother is pregnant, and you know what I mean. Like he has all these different things he's kind of juggling in his mind. And then when it does make that turn, and we get to like where he has the water of life, and he kind of becomes that Messiah character for real and gives that awesome speech, I felt like, to the council, which was just like goosebumps for me, man. That was really, really cool. That scene, you mentioned the scene earlier in Black and White with Austin Butler, that scene, and then when they have their battle at the end, which I also really liked, between Paul and Fjord Rotha. I love that scene too. But I love the pacing and how those were kind of spaced out and how they all kind of spoke to Paul's arc throughout the movie. Like it was really believable to me that it was playing out the way it was and we were following, like you said, his journey. But again, I think this proves the point that I was connected to it, whereas you weren't. So I think that's just the big difference here. And I mean, I think we're both in agreement that the film, cinematography, production design, the score, the performances, the costumes. I mean, this is fucking like a master class on another level when you're talking about like technical achievements in film. And I ate it up, man. I ate it. I did not think I was going to like this movie as much as I did. I actually muted the hashtag on Twitter, some of the hashtags, because I started seeing people that were like, greatest sci-fi movie ever made and all this shit. And I was like, all right, hang on a second, guys. And I muted it, and that was a couple weeks ago. And after seeing it, I don't think it's the greatest sci-fi movie ever, but I think I'm going to go out on a limb so that people can go back and listen to this 10 years from now. I think this might be one of the best sequels ever.
Wow. I mean, that's a big call. I really, I'm a details guy. Like I want to be more immersed in literally every aspect of it. If there was ever like director's cuts of these movies where, we got to spend more time with these characters, not necessarily to learn more about the world. You learn the world through the characters' eyes. Like you get to spend time in the world with the characters, and that's how you learn everything about it. I think if I got to spend more time with these characters, maybe I would come to love it more. I do want to watch part 2 again because I watched part 1 twice. Like I do want to watch part 2 again just to see if it does engender any more love for me. But like I want to get into some of my other quibbles that I have with the film that necessarily don't work for me from a narrative standpoint. First of all, sure. Gerald, how they like I know in like in the first movie, the worms are like this mythical creature that you see like here periodically in there. But like in the second movie, they're like riding these things.
Yeah.
Like how are they using them to ride like all over the planet and stuff like that? Like how do they have like whole civilizations of people on their back? Like are the worms just like, do they control the worms? Is it just because they're riding the worms that they're able to like the worm like obeys them in some way or whatever because they're riding them? Like that was really, really unclear to me that like all of a sudden they have like their whole, all the people strapped to the backs of these things riding all the way across the planet to go to the south. Like why would the worm just not be pissed off and just be like, well, I don't want these people on me, and dive underneath the sand and like kill them all?
Yeah, they don't explain it, at least in the movies. I'm assuming it goes in detail in the books. But my kind of suspension of disbelief and the way I kind of understood it was that whoever is driving the worm, if you will, is kind of controlling it. I mean, that's kind of the way.
Is this like a Lisa Frankenstein thing? Like you just have to accept that the tanning bed brings people back to life? Is that what it is?
I mean, essentially,
you just have to accept that people can just ride the worms and just do whatever they want to.
Well, I think that, yes, but I think that scene with Timmy riding it and getting his wings with the Furman there, I think that's where I am kind of divulging what I'm saying to you.
I mean, that's a good scene. That was the scene when I went to see Dune Part 1 in the theater. They had a sneak peek at a scene from Dune 2. That was the scene that we got to watch. We got to watch the worm, like him first, like riding his first worm and like all that kind of stuff. So that was the scene I got to watch like ahead of time. So I knew that was coming. and I enjoyed that. That did like that was that's just a quibble of mine narratively. Like I just kind of was like, maybe I could have used a little bit more explanation of like how and why they can just like the worms are just all of a sudden like trains that they could just basically saddle up on and just
Right.
ride wherever they want to.
Well, I'm just more wondering how they get off the worm.
That was what I was
'cause,
wondering too. I'm like, how do they get off these things? So they
how
just
do you
did
get
they
off
just
the
let
thing
go
going
and
100
like,
miles an hour or whatever?
yeah, the worm just disappears beneath the sand and then you're just left standing on top of it. But like also like I don't know how you felt about this necessarily, but like all of a sudden, like the film does this weird thing where it cuts to a spice harvester landing and harvesting spice, and then the Fremen, led by Timothy Chalamet's character, attacks it. And all of a sudden you find out it's Josh Brolin's character from the first movie is still alive somehow. Like didn't die, and then all of a like he's a smuggler now, I guess. Like that wasn't super clear to me, like how all of a sudden he came back. And like also to kind of through line to that, like it seems like the only reason he really comes back is just to have like a revenge moment against Dave Bautista's character. But me, am I wrong, or like did Bautista just get done dirty in this movie? Like Brolin's character runs up at him during the siege of the city and literally just kills him, just like straight up like stabs him and kills him. It's over in 4 seconds.
Right. Well, Batista too, at least in part two, as Beast Robin, is because in the first movie he was much more menacing, and we already kind of talked about how the villains weren't really super prominent in the first movie. But when
he doesn't do anything in the first movie either, though.
No, but he had a much more like commanding presence. I felt like in part two, he started out that way. Like he has that one scene where he bashes the dude's head in the fucking computer or map or whatever when they're talking about the plan. But I feel like as this movie went on, as part two went on, Austin Butler kind of took on that role more.
Right.
And Dave Bautista's kind of commanding presence kind of dwindled a little bit. And then ultimately, you know, he gets faded. Because there was a couple moments of humiliation for that character in this movie.
A couple, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. And I think it was trying to flip the script to the other Harkonnens that were supposed to be a little more prominent. But then, of course, Floyd Roth ends up dying at the end, too, at the hand of Paul. So, or at least I assume he does. I mean, I haven't read the books. I don't know if he's still alive or whatever, but the implication is that he's dead.
I just thought that character was done dirty. Like
I agree.
The whole thing, like that was the whole kind of point of Brolin's character's side plot or whatever, was that he was going to take revenge on him for the initial attack in the first movie, and then literally like that fight is a nothing burger. Like literally runs up to him and stabs him, and it's over. It's like I was kind of like looking forward to that thing. Like I feel like those are decisions that were made, and like I haven't read the book, and I don't care about the book necessarily. Like the book does not necessarily mean anything to me in terms of like if you did or didn't include this, it does or doesn't make a good adaptation. Like you still have to make the film work on its own merit. And I think if you're going to bring this character back for this whole side plot of like he wants revenge against his character, you can't have a nothing burger of a 4-second fight where he just stabs him once and it's over. Like you need to pay that off to the audience, because like I'm waiting for that as an audience member, and then it's just like, oh, okay.
He's dead.
Sure. Yeah, he's just gone. He's just dead. Like that was it. Okay, sure.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that the movie did maybe successfully for me and not as successfully for you, tried to make the ultimate battle between Floyd and Paul as the main event, if you will. And it kind of tried to shift that.
Right.
focus.
But am I supposed to care about all of House Atreides, or am I supposed to just care about Paul? Am I supposed to care about all of the Fremen, or am I just supposed to care about Paul?
That's actually a good question. I think it circles through Paul, but that's actually a good mindset to kind of. I get what you're saying.
Because the whole thing is like he puts on like there's a whole thing of like him taking off his father's ring for a while, and then he puts it back on because he is, Duke Atreides, like he is, because his father died. So he is, the Duke of the House of Atreides and all these kinds of different things. And like that's still an important thing. And like the film wanted me to care about that in the first movie. Like, should I still care about that? Should I only care about the freedom of the Fremen people and that kind of thing? Can I also ask you a question about the Fremen, Gerald?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they get their technology from? Because I assume it comes from somewhere that we just don't see. But like all the technology they get, like the suit that turns your moisture into drinking water, and like the compass that's like the fancy schmancy compass, and like all the guns and stuff like that they have, like all the technology and all that stuff, where they get it all from, because they're like living in caves and stuff.
You're gonna have to read the books.
Nothing.
You're gonna have to read the books. It's
And I mean,
most likely in the books.
I shouldn't have to read a book to make a film adaptation work. I shouldn't.
But I didn't read the books, Nick, and I enjoyed it. All right.
I mean,
suspension of disbelief, brother. You just got to accept it. You just got to ride the worm.
I know. All right. The tanning bed just brings them back to life. Don't ask questions. It just happens. I get it. I get it.
Oh man, you did give this the same score as you gave Lisa Frankenstein, though, didn't you?
Yeah, because I mean, this was I wanted to love this so much. I mentioned this in the Patreon.
Well, I did
too. I know I'm talking a lot about it, but I wanted to love this. I purposely watched part 1 twice because I was like, maybe I just missed something, or maybe I wasn't invested enough in it, or maybe I got to watch it again just to really let it all grasp me or something. And it just never did. I feel like there's still way too many unanswered questions about this, which I don't know if the first 2 movies covered just the book of Dune. If it's like if they both,
I don't know either. I know there's like a Dune Messiah, then there's like Children of Dune.
There's like all sorts of different books in this series or whatever. Some of which I don't think are written by Herbert. Some are. I don't know. I don't know how any of that stuff necessarily works, but like I feel like there's just still too many like unanswered questions about this. Like I still don't really understand what the Bene Gesserit are, aside from like space witches that are kind of the ones that are like really pulling the strings. I don't understand necessarily, like I don't understand enough about the Imperium to really understand why they're siding with the quote unquote bad guys, the Harkonnens, in this movie. I don't understand why all the Harkonnens are bald. I don't understand why Stellan Skarsgård has to take an oil bath and he's big and fat and floats around.
Yeah. What about speaking of that, the Baron there, Stellan Skarsgård, who I thought's great in this role, by the way. He's pretty menacing. He's got a good performance, I think.
Yeah.
But what about the moment when Paul kills him? That's his grandfather, right? So that's Rebecca Ferguson's dad, right? That's the way I understand.
Yes. Yeah. That's a reveal that comes in the 3rd act of this movie, that she is actually a Harkonnen. She's his daughter. She's descended from him,
so
and
Paul
everything.
Has both. Right.
So Paul has both. Paul's a little bit from both worlds. Which, did you care about that reveal at all? Because I got to tell you, I didn't care at all, and I didn't know why I was supposed to.
I don't know that I did care. I think it made interesting for future developments. I think it's an interesting, because like, I mean, all the Harkonnen stuff is shot in black and white. Like you said, they're all bald and like look like albinos, and like very dreary, dark world and immoral for the most part. And then you look at the Atreides side, and it's colorful and greenery, and like, what I mean?
What was the deal with the fireworks on like the Harkonnen homeworld? Like, didn't they look like almost like liquid fireworks to you?
Oh, you talking about yeah.
Like I don't know what the deal with that was, but I mean,
I was saying,
I don't know.
Yeah, but what I was saying, more logistics. But what I was saying was, it's interesting because he's got both of that, and I think that Timothy did a really good job with his performance and kind of showing both sides at different times too. Like, being that sympathetic kind of, I don't want to do this because I can see I could see a possible path where this goes wrong. And then there's moments where he's pretty menacing himself, and he'll have those little outbursts that you can kind of see that dark side coming out of him a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit of, Anakin Skywalker type arc. I feel like, I don't know if it plays out like that because I haven't read the books, but I think it was an interesting thing to put in there to make his character a little more layered and a little more kind of hard to predict, unpredictable.
I think it comes too late in the movie for me to really have much of an effect on me at that point in terms of that character's growth. At that point, I feel like it's too late. It's too late in the proceedings. I feel like maybe we needed that reveal a little bit earlier for that to have mattered like a whole lot. I would have loved a lot more of Austin Butler's character. I agree.
Me too.
again, that scene in the arena, like early, like, and he's just sitting there, like he's got like the servant girls that are like waiting on him, and he just like so callously just like snaps his arm back and like slits one of their throats, like just without a whim. Like, that's how cold and evil that character is, which is great, and that's what you really need in like a good screen villain. But I mean, like I said, once he shows up on Arrakis, he literally does nothing. And that's the thing that really, really bummed me out about that character. Is like, if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna give me a character that's this badass and that cold and that's like terrifying and calculating and everything like that, like, let me see him flex, man. Like, let me see him like really put the screws to the good guys. That's another kind of thing that I don't know, man. Like, I'm not saying every story has to have this kind of arc to it, but like, I don't feel like the good guys are ever. The good guys, to me, never felt like they were threatened by the Imperium, by the Harkonnens, or anything like that. Like, they kind of never really got challenged in this. I didn't feel like. I feel like they kind of, every challenge that they had, they were just kind of like, psh. Like, did you feel like that? Did they kind of walk through any challenges that they had, or do you feel like they actually? Because like even like the battle, like when they have to go, like when the Emperor's ship shows up and like they go to confront the Emperor, like I felt like that was so fast that they basically didn't even struggle with it. Like their struggle against the Harkonnens and the Imperium in this film, like that whole thing, the Batista Josh Brolin fight is a microcosm of that, where it was like literally it wasn't even a challenge for the Fremen and for Paul Atreides. Like, it wasn't even, it didn't even try. Like, it was just like, it was just like nothing to them. Like, they were super OP and the villains were super underpowered. So they just walked right through. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's how I felt. Like, that's just the sense that I got.
I get it. I get what you're saying, and I think that's the way it kind of played out on screen too. But I mean, they were definitely a force, though. I felt like they had that huge army. They kept showing those like wide shots of all the different, soldiers that were fighting for them, and then even when they had the scene in the arena, and you get to see, the whole planet or whatever, townspeople, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, they're definitely the bad guys because they had all their army troops marching in formations with like tanks behind them. Like we see in like the propaganda videos from like North Korea, or like old school propaganda videos from like the Soviet Union and stuff. Like, yeah, naturally. Like that was definitely what it was meant to evoke anyway.
I just wanted to ask before we wrap up here what you thought of kind of the ending. Like, obviously, the culmination is the battle there at the end with Fjordratha and Paul, and then a lot of implications with the Emperor and with Florence Pugh's character and taking her hand in marriage to combine the families and all that stuff. And then, of course, the offset of that is the only person that's kind of not on board with what's happening with the Messiah storyline is Zendaya, is Chani, which is the love of his life, for all intents and purposes, his soulmate. And so she's not down with it, basically. Yeah. And more of her beautiful performance that you already mentioned comes through in the ending shots of this film.
Dude, she's so good in this. It's kind of silly how good she is. Like, I mean, she's so talented. It's insane.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you think of this, last 10 minutes or so?
I mean,
does it make you want to see part 3?
No, not at all.
It doesn't.
So here's the thing. Like, okay, Gerald, you answer me this question. I'm going to pitch it back to you I'm going to answer your question with a question. Okay. Who are these other houses? Because they've beaten the Harkonnens and they've overthrown the Emperor, which means they've like taken down the Imperium. Who are the other houses? We don't know anything about the other houses at all. Who are they? Tell me who they are.
No, we don't.
Why should I be worried about them? Because they literally walked through the Imperium and the Harkonnens in these two movies. They were basically a nothing burger of a threat. Like, right. all I foresee is like, okay, they're gonna load up on their spaceships and they're gonna go beat them too. Like, okay. Like, sure, like
so let's do it.
Like, the whole point, like, think about, you mentioned Star Wars. Like, people are trying to draw the comparisons between this and Star Wars and things like that. And Star Wars, original Star Wars trilogy is not perfect. I really dislike Jedi, and I don't think the first Star Wars movie is a great movie by any stretch. But what did that trilogy do? Like, man, it really, really put the screws to the rebels. Like, they were on their last heels. Like, the Imperials attack like their last outpost, kidnaps Han Solo, traps him in carbonite. Like, Luke gets his hand cut off. Like, all these different things. Like Empire's a dark movie where you feel like your characters are like reeling and they're back on their heels. And like, are they even going to be able to come back from this and everything like that? there's no arc like that in Dune, at least not yet. Like, and like the first movie to the second movie of like the Harkonnens like banishing them out to the desert and stuff like that, not even close. That does not
Yeah.
even come close to that level. Like Star Wars has its flaws, like a lot of them, but like I feel like the overall arc in Star Wars, if you want to draw the comparisons, if people are trying to pull those comparisons, not even close. And like I said, this doesn't touch Lord of the Rings. It doesn't even come close. Not even close.
I think on a cinematic scope, it does.
I think it's shot as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I would venture to say that it rivals it in terms of, if nothing else, production wise and visually, and just the scale of it. I mean, I've already mentioned it once on this episode, and it comes up often when you guys break my balls. But I mean, I hate long movies. I fucking love this. Like I love the Two Towers too. You know, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't, but I just was just invested in this. And I think coming off the first one, maybe I was just pleasantly surprised by how much heightened this one was. And, to me, it was just a different vibe. The first one was much more informational, and like, even the climax of the first movie is just him having that battle with Jamis and the Furman, and that's kind of it. But I mean, it wasn't like a high stakes, like, epic battle like some of the ones we got in this movie. So just those comparisons and kind of like building on the world that I was already introduced to. I just love this thing. I mean, we're wrapping up, and I've said what I want to say about it. Real quick, what did you think of Florence Pugh's character here? Because she's my queen. In this case, she's my princess. And just in case she listens to this, I want her to know that. But what do you think of her addition to this story? Her costumes were perfect, were they not?
Her costumes were perfect because she's perfect, Gerald. I mean,
Perfect.
she's just absolutely incredible. I love Florence Pugh. I love, like, if she's in future installments of this, like if they do make a part 3 or whatever, like I'll be excited to see what she brings to it and things like that. Like, I don't think she necessarily got enough to do in this movie. Would you disagree? Did she really have a whole lot to do in this movie though?
She was doing that. She was doing that year 10,000 blogging, basically, where she's like, taking her notes, and it's also for the purposes of kind of narrating to us different.
But I mean, that's like a good question to ask about, like, all the additions that they made this time around. Like, we talked about Austin Butler a lot, but like, did you like Christopher Walken as the Emperor? Like, did that play well for you?
I mean, it was Walken playing Walken. I thought he was pretty. Honestly, though, he was a kind of against type a little bit because he was a very quiet kind of character in this movie. But he did still have that kind of authoritative menace.
I think maybe they wanted to avoid the memes of like, "I'll get you, Paul Atreides." Like, I can't do a good Walken. Everybody can do a good Walken, but me, I can't do a good one. But
yeah,
like they wanted to avoid that thing when I'm coming for you, Paul Atreides. Like, I can't do one. I don't even know what that was. That was. Oh.
Man, I really like all the performances in this. I think Javier Bardem's awesome. He played Stilgar, the guy that's just like in love with Timmy.
He's a lot more of the comic relief this time around.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
I don't know how to pronounce her name. I don't think Leah Sadu, is that right? But I loved her introduction. She played one of the other.
She was one of the like Bene Gesserit. Yeah, one of the.
Right. Yeah, she was Lady Margot. She was the one that kind of seduced Floyd Rotha. And had that one scene with him, which I thought was really good. But yeah, there was. I mean, 10 out of 10. Obviously, I loved it. I mean, it's my favorite movie of the year so far. We're only in March, but I mean, I think it's one of the better sequels in recent memory. I think it's one of the better sci-fi films in recent memory. I mean, this cast, man. If this is not nominated for ensemble cast next year, it's something like that. I mean, holy shit. I mean, just a marquee lineup. And Villeneuve at the top of his game. I mean, I've loved a lot of his movies. Arrival, Prisoners. We talked about Dune Part 1 a little bit already. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing, but this is probably his best film from like a production value standpoint. And you even said it, and you gave the movie a 5, and you even said that this, when people say like, see it on the biggest screen possible, make sure you go to the theater. Like, people kind of use that all the time, but this is what they're talking about when they say that. Movies like this and movies like Oppenheimer, like, literally have to be seen to be believed on that type of screen. And I got to see this in IMAX, and it was honestly a freaking blast, man, and I loved it. I'm sorry you didn't like it more, kind of like what you said, but yeah, 10
I
out of 10 for
hate
me.
when I feel like this about movies that everybody else loves because I feel like I'm missing something about it. Like I feel like I'm not on the train, and it's not the
Or on the worm.
really,
You're
it's
not
not
on the
the,
worm.
yeah, there you go. I was gonna say it's not the really annoying like ridiculous train in Snowpiercer because everybody loves that movie, and I hate that movie though.
No.
I didn't hate Dune. I didn't hate Dune Part 2. I didn't think they were terrible or anything like that. They're just not for me. Like they didn't strike that chord with me that I was hoping they would. I would still, even though my score is a 5, which is technically a failing grade for me, I would still recommend seeing them on the biggest screen that you possibly can. I definitely think like the presentation, it's so epic, and the grandeur of it is worth seeing on the big screen alone, even if you don't come away from it necessarily loving the narrative like I did. I mean, at least I got to see it in theaters. I'm really glad that they did the reissue of Part 1 so I could see that in theaters too. I was really hoping that they would do the reissue. Although, Gerald, I was the only one in that theater for my showing of Dune Part 1 when I went to see it.
Oh, wow.
Literally the only person in the theater to watch the reissue of Dune Part 1.
Well, you should have
which
gotten yourself a bucket then. I mean, could have been you in the bucket having a day.
my score would have been a little bit higher, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
All right, that's our discussion on Dune Part 2, guys. The correct score is Gerald, 10 out of 10. And then the incorrect score this week is coming from Nick, 5 out of 10. Although he did grade it as highly as he graded Lisa Frankenstein, so that's good.
Make
That's
me
something.
care about Space Jesus, and I would have been all on board. But yeah,
Something else that I know you love is Adam Sandler's dramatic chops, and we're going to be talking about Spaceman next week. The new Adam Sandler helmed another sci-fi film, actually. And it's a Netflix original that just dropped on Netflix this week, and that's going to be our review next week, guys. That's the plan, to talk about Spaceman.
This wasn't made by who were the hacks that directed that pile of garbage movie that you loved so much?
Are you talking about Uncut Gems?
Yeah, who are the hacks that made that pile of garbage?
That's
the Safdie brothers or whatever. Yeah,
Safdie
they didn't have
brothers,
anything to do with this movie, did they? The Spaceman? Because I've seen Sandler's.
I wish they had.
Sandler's done some good stuff dramatically before. Uncut Gems aside, he was so bad in that movie. My God,
damn!
I've never seen someone.
Now you're getting me upset again.
I've never seen someone try so hard to want to be taken seriously as an actor. Like that's what that movie was. It was trying to act the movie.
Hey,
God.
Sandler's gif. I'm going to share with you. I disagree. As he's walking out of the shop. All right, so let's do. Are you excited for Spaceman though? Seriously,
I don't know anything about it. I know I did see.
I watched it last night. It's good.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I'll
I'm
elaborate
excited.
on that. But.
I'm excited. I mean, listen. 2024 again has not been off to a great start for me. Argyle was god awful, and I walked away from both Lisa Frankenstein and Dune Part 2 being like, those are movies I saw.
You're gonna have a tough time doing your top 5.
It's gonna be tough.
Things will pick up.
I ain't rounding nothing out to the top 10 at this point. I'm telling you that.
Nick, it's always therapeutic and helps me out when I get to talk movies with you, man. So I appreciate it. And Dune Part 2 was better for me than it was for you, but it was a blast talking to you about it. Now, get on your worm, get the hell out of here, find that popcorn bucket, do something with it, make yourself happy, and then we'll talk about Sandman next week.
I kept telling you guys Gerald was going to try to do anything he could to get out of Review and Drive Away Dolls, and he finally did it. He was just like, no, I can't do it.
I didn't get a chance to see it. I don't even know if it's still playing here. It's only been a week. I don't think it's.
I don't know. I didn't get a chance to see it. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I've been so busy, tied up with so many different things. Like I said, I've been working to try to get live stream for the Cure stuff off the ground. So make sure you stay tuned. I mean, we'll be talking a lot more about it on this show as well over the next 3 months. G likes to play a huge part in it as well, at least when I let him. And it's one of the great passion of my life, truly, to raise money for cancer research and to help fight for a world immune to cancer. So make sure you mark your calendars. May 29th through June 1st is this year's event. 8th annual. We're going to push over the 6-digit mark this year, Gerald. Indie podcasting,
Nice.
all indie podcasters, all indie content creators, like really small guys with no audiences like us, raising over $100,000 after this year's event. So it's going to be amazing. Man. But we're going for 25 again this year too. So
that's crazy. I'm proud of you and everybody that's been involved year after year. I'll be there again this year, man, doing whatever you need me to do, and I'm looking forward to it. Danny Boy dropped the information down below in the show notes for them. Check out Livestream for the Cure. It's coming up in a few months. And like Nick said, we'll be reminding you as we get closer and closer to the event. Next week, Nick, let's get together. Let's talk about Adam Sandler. Let's talk about Spaceman. And if, by the way, if you get a chance to check out All of Us Strangers, Nick, which is currently on Hulu now, you can stream it on Hulu. We could review that on Patreon if you want. It was one of my favorite movies from last year.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, it never opened here. I never got a chance to see it. You know what's actually no. Ooh, I gotta check because it was supposed to be opening at like the beginning of the year or beginning of the month for like limited engagements was Zone of Interest as well, which I still didn't get a chance to see from
We could
last
also
year.
do that
So
one if you want.
I still want to see that too because I wanted to get that one in too. So yeah,
So
I'll try.
We'll see what you watch this week, and then if you want to throw up a Patreon review for one of those, I've seen both, and they both would have a lot to talk about. So let me know. We'll see how it goes, and then for the main review, we'll do Spaceman next week. Nick, I love you, brother. Thanks for getting together and get all that sand out of your boxers.